Here we go. All right, shalom everybody. Welcome to a special Breaking Israel News interview. I'm Rabbi Tuli Weiss from Breaking Israel News, here today with my good friend and mentor, Sondra Oster Baras from the Christian Friends of Israeli Communities. So nice to see you and have you here today, Sondra.
Well, it's great to be here. I laugh when you say mentor. That was a long time ago.
Sondra, tell us just quickly a little bit about yourself and about CFOIC.
Well, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and moved to Israel 35 years ago. And about 22 years ago, I founded an organization called Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, where we have been connecting Christians from all over the world with the Jewish communities here in Judea and Samaria. And I'm talking to you now from my office in Samaria.
Okay, great. And so you are in touch with Christians all the time who are specifically interested in supporting Judea and Samaria, the biblical name for what's also known in the media as West Bank.
West Bank, right.
Or even the occupied territories. We won't go into all of that right now. What I wanted to hear from you about is that there's a lot of attention on Secretary of State Pompeo's recent visit to Israel, and perhaps what was the agenda of his visit? Why was it so important amidst the corona pandemic that he had to get on an airplane and come immediately and only to Israel? And it was because he wanted to talk to the new government of Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, about something very important to the Trump administration, and that is annexation. So first of all, Sondra, can you explain what annexation is all about? What does it even mean?
Okay, well, in 1967, Israel captured Judea and Samaria as a result of an attack on Israel by Jordan at that time. And this meant that Israel was returning to the heart of biblical Israel. We were coming back to these places like the old city of Jerusalem and Hebron and Shechem and Bethlehem, places where, we unfortunately didn't have control of it at the beginning of statehood. Ever since then, and we're talking about more than 50 years now, Israel has been kind of ambivalent of what will be the future of these areas. Now, I'm part of what's often known as the settlement movement. I'm part of those people who today number close to 500,000 Jews who have come into these areas and settled them and taken the barren hilltops and turned them into beautiful cities and towns and communities. And all this time, we have been treated kind of as the stepchild of Israel, to a certain extent in Israel, but to a very large extent all over the world, where there are boycotts against Israel because of us, and so many other things, because around the world people believe, and still unfortunately most governments around the world believe, that Israel should be handing this area in its entirety to the Arabs so that they can create a Palestinian state. And this, of course, is anathema to us, because for us, we didn't conquer somebody else's land. We came back to our own biblical land, and thank God, God has blessed our efforts, and we have these wonderful communities. So annexation really is just Israel putting the legal finish on what in practice has been going on for most of these 50 years. That is Israel possessing, controlling this area. And people, Israelis living there as full Israeli citizens. Once Israel annexes this area, though, it kind of makes a very important statement that Israel is basically saying in the clearest voice possible, we are here to stay, we are not leaving this at any time.
Okay, so this has been an issue for 53 years. Why is it in the headlines right now?
Well, I think two things really have developed. First of all, even those who are strong advocates of controlling the area, living in the area, the idea of annexation was a little bit troubling, even the biggest supporters, because we weren't sure what we would do with all the Arabs who are living here. And then in the process, we had this Oslo so-called peace process, which handed large parts of the area over to the Palestinian Authority, not as a state, but as some sort of autonomy. And as a result of all that, and of course of the failure of that process, more and more people in Israel begin to understand that it is critical that we annex the area. That also, if we want to advance peace, we have to make sure that the terrorists and the Arabs who want to throw us out of here realize that that's not an option, that they have to look at living with us in peace as opposed to trying to get rid of us. And these ideas have grown over the past 10 years, I would say, in Israel, translating what was until then just some kind of vague ideology into a very legal, practical step of annexation. And eventually, and I would say thanks to, in part, to Naftali Bennett, who was the first mainstream politician to get behind this idea. And I think he and others like him ended up convincing Netanyahu that this was a wise step. But on the other hand, we had something else going on, and that is, for the first time in history, certainly first time since the State of Israel, we have an amazingly supportive American administration. President Trump has not only been more supportive of Israel than any other American president, but he has also taken some very bold steps. For example, the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, which had been, every foreign policy advisor had always advised the presidents against this, and here Trump did this. And so this opened up an opportunity for us. And indeed, Netanyahu and Trump had a meeting of the minds where Netanyahu presented this idea of annexation, and Trump embraced it.
So Trump has embraced the message of annexation, and some are saying that Trump is particularly embracing the message of annexation, specifically because of his voter base and specifically his evangelical Christian voter base. Do you believe that's true?
100%. And one of the things that was particularly was an amazing kind of statement, and Israelis started to really understand the role of evangelical Christians in all of this, was at the ceremony that opened the embassy in Jerusalem, where the two speakers that were there on behalf of the U.S. government were two pastors. One of whom was John Hagee, someone who I have known personally for many years, and who has been a very vocal advocate for Israel. And all of a sudden, people here in Israel began to say, wow, the people who have the closest influence on President Trump, at least on the Israel issue, are the same people who have been the strongest evangelical Christian support for Israel this past, 20 years or so. And that really, really helped us to understand how this opportunity is something we dare not miss right now, while we have this amazing partnership between evangelical Christians and the President of the United States.
Now, I know that the evangelical Christians care deeply about Jerusalem. They often will say, they often pray for the peace of Jerusalem. However, what about Judea and Samaria and annexation? Is that really on the radar screen of evangelical Christians?
Oh, I believe it is. I've been talking only to Christians for 22 years now, only about Judea and Samaria. And I am always welcomed with incredible enthusiasm, both from Christians in the United States and actually from all over the world. For years now, people have said to me, is Israel going to annex? Most Christians don't even understand that Israel hasn't already annexed. Most Christians assume that it belongs to Israel legally as well as biblically.
So what are the main reasons? Why do Christians care about annexation? What are the main reasons that they are passionate about annexation?
Well, I would say like this. The reason Christians love Israel and are supportive of Israel is because of God's promise to Abraham. God spoke to Abraham in Genesis 12 and said, I will give this land to your children. When that promise was made, he was actually standing in the middle of Samaria on a hilltop called the Oak of Moreh, right near the city of Shechem. And from that point onward, the Bible talks not only about the land of Israel, but so much of the prophecies, so much of the actual events that take place in the Bible take place in Judea and Samaria. And Christians understand that. And if their whole support for Israel is deriving from their biblical understanding of the relationship between the God of Israel, the land of Israel, and the people of Israel, then once they understand that Judea and Samaria is the biblical heartland, it's a no-brainer. Well, how can that not be part of the state of Israel? Is more often the kind of response I receive from Christians.
And what do Christians who care about the biblical heartland and who care about annexation, what do you believe they should be doing right now?
Well, I would love to see every Christian who loves Israel raise their voice in some format to make it known in public how they feel. Write to your senators or congressmen. Get your pastors to speak out about this in church. The reason this is happening is because Trump understood, and I think fairly so, understood that it is the Christian support, the very power base that he relies on, it is the Christians, that same power base, support annexation. And so now is the time when we need to have that understanding of Trump's reinforced. And if this is the word that's going on from churches and Christian congregations all over the United States, that's a word that will resonate powerfully within the halls of the White House.
Well, Sondra, thank you so much. This is a complicated issue. You made it very simple, and I really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody watching this on Zoom and on Facebook Live also was able to understand the complex issue, and thanks for explaining it to us. So shalom, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Rabbi Tully.
Thanks for